Alrighty, we'll call the meeting to order. First thing, before we do roll call, I want to let everyone know that John Eppers submitted his resignation this morning due to a work conflict. So
Who was that?
John Eppers. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's pretty hard to hear you.
Yeah. This one. So I guess council at some point will make arrangements for another alternate and move up to the full crab board. But we'll go ahead with the roll call.
Ms. Bain? Ms. Chapu? This wasn't on. I apologize. Ms. Bain? Ms. Chapu? Mr. Dugan?
Present.
Mr. Dribbin? Here. Mr. Eppers is no longer with us. Ms. Finney?
Here.
Ms. Johnson? Mr. Heil?
Here.
Ms. Kirkton?
Here.
Kyle is here and Mr. Yockley.
Okay. You have a quorum. We'll go on to approval of the minutes. They've been distributed. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, I have a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second,
A second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. And no public comment that I can see. No. No governance items. Any member discussion and questions? We'll move on to new business. It's a review of the amended bylaws related to alternate members voting.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I've sent out for your consideration a very short and succinct amendment. The only section of the bylaws that I changed was that in subsection 5, which is quorum. And here we had addressed already at the end of the original paragraph, it says, to the extent that an alternate member is necessary to form a quorum, that alternate shall be allowed to vote on any and all motions. I added this sentence: even if unnecessary to form a quorum, alternates shall be allowed to vote on any and all motions. Now, if we do anything more than that, we have to change subsection 4, which is special meetings, which is the number of people that are necessary to actually call a new meeting. And then under general items, which is Article 7, even though paragraph 1 says a majority, obviously at this point, since we're counting all the votes, and we would, instead of 9, be 10, a majority becomes 6 rather than 5, right? But subsection 2 of that has a provision for changing the rules. A supermajority, if you're going to do that. I did not change that. We don't have to. I'm just simply making you aware of that. We're leaving that at the same number. So 1 and 3 both talk about majority votes. That's just the way it works. The only problem you run into by counting all the votes, we talked about this, is that you could run into a tie. If you run into a tie, the word majority means you have to have 1+. So while 5 would normally be a win, in this instance, if you have 5, you might find yourself in a tie. Simply be prepared for that. That would simply be reflected as not having passed if it's a tie, and you move on to the next thing. So I just want to make you aware of that. There's no way to make this work by counting the alternates, and we can't simply increase the number of the board because the ordinance says you will have 9.
Right,
So we're stuck with that.
okay,
But it gives everybody a vote, and there's it. You just have to recognize that there may be some things that we have to bounce around. We can work past it. Nothing will stop.
okay. Do you need us to vote on this sentence?
Yes, and again, typically though, if you look at subsection 3, it says they can be amended at any regular meeting of the board by a majority vote of all members, provided written notice of the proposed amendment shall have been mailed to all members at least 10 days prior. Now, again, you obviously haven't had that. So I would suggest you take it up at the next meeting.
Okay.
not this one.
Okay. And we'll get that sent out to everybody.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
do we have that language or are you just you?
no,
Okay.
yeah, but we'll get that sent out and we'll take it up the next time.
Just follow up. Does this clarify, I mean, are we promoting one of the alternates to full?
You can't do that, okay?
Yeah.
That has to be council.
council?
So,
Okay.
because it says council shall appoint. So again, they'll take that issue up and whether they want to appoint another alternate. Frankly, again, my recommendation to council is going to be, you've done so much work at this point, bringing an alternate in right now who has no idea. You know, and there's been such great involvement from your two alternates that, again, the likelihood of us finding ourselves in a position where that would truly be problematic is really very small. So I don't think we need at this point, but, and that would be my recommendation to council, but they have to make that point. Now, in terms of which of the alternates then moves up, that needs to be done by council as well, and we'll talk about that at our next meeting, which is May the 2nd.
Tammy joined us. Hi, Tammy. Okay. Any more questions on the bylaw change? No. We'll move on to recommended charter revisions. And one thing I'd like to look at before we delve into the departments is section 14.9 voting. And you all have this little slip of paper with the language on it that Neil has looked at, and that was the part where the state wanted a yes or no answer to being for and against an ordinance. And so the language now is reflected in red, the added language, and then all the strike throughs below that sentence on.
So that language was original to the 54 charter, completely unnecessary these days. And what you've done here is by adding a phrase, you've eliminated half a page, which is great.
Okay. Give everybody time to look at that.
There's one
Okay.
question. Is the comma needed after commissioners? I mean, and is there a distinguishing aspect to having the comma after commissioners and language?
I always hear when it's a comma that nobody can really explain that we call it an English comma. So it's not essential. No, it's not necessary. Most commas aren't.
Other than the comma, are we happy?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so on our charter items, we did note that that was a priority for the council to deal with, so that's is everybody still okay with that? Okay, all right. Then the last time we had a discussion about morals, and that's section 2.13. And to see where we stood on that now. Is there a preference for striking that from the charter? Or is it something we want council to deal with?
I mean, I would be in favor of removing that language or changing it.
Okay,
It's a vague term.
Yeah, I agree.
Jennifer, get rid of it.
I would, yeah.
Okay, Matthew,
Absolutely.
Kyle,
That's not a priority.
not a
Not a
priority.
priority for me.
Okay, and Melissa. Okay. So, well, Tammy, do you have a preference for that? You're on mute.
Yes, I would like that to be removed.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, wait, 4 is not a preference. 1, 2, 3.
Three is not. Melissa, myself, and Joseph.
And me,
Oh, you is not a preference?
no,
Oh, I
it's
apologize.
yeah,
Well,
so that is what? 4 to 4.
or four.
We'll put it in the column for council to look at. Is that agreeable?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, the next big thing was the removal of departments and boards and commissions, and Neil has started to look at that, and we also have a paper such as this where we can look at the rationale. If we're going to go down that road, we need a rationale for why we're doing this, to talk to the public about it and see if there's any unforeseen problems. Are there any downfalls with it? But Neil, do you want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what you are thinking?
Yes, if you look at the, if you look at the charter as it exists now, we have a lot of room in this charter that we've dedicated to the concept of these departments and what departments we think should exist and we talk about them. But we give no detail. We simply say, you can have this department, you can have this department, you can, and then in the code, if you've looked at the code, that's where we find the details of what the departments do and how they do it. So I've suggested language that I've sent to the chair that is an initial language. I just want to make sure everything is consistent with it. But basically it just outlines in a paragraph form that you will have these departments and that you will create in the code a description of what those departments do, which is what we're doing now. It would eliminate subsections. Well, it would eliminate sections 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11, because I also included their boards and commissions. So you can say that we have the right to create boards and commissions by ordinance. We will establish what it is they do. We can list what those departments are, but then leave all the rest of it as we do right now to ordinance. You would eliminate all of those articles and all those sections because you don't need them. But it still preserves my concerns that, again, going back to the 1954 grant, this is all part of what was granted in 54. You put it all in there. In 71, we changed the statute. Now you don't have to. I still believe that we should err on the side of caution and leave some reference to it, but it's the most minute reference. It literally comes down to two and a half paragraphs that are small paragraphs that would state all the things that we need to state for this area. Again, it streamlines the charter. I think it makes it more readable, more understanding. I think it's a friendlier charter to understand at that point, but it also recognizes then the responsibility of council and the city manager to outline then what it is these departments actually do.
And Neil, but even if you leave that little paragraph in there, wouldn't it still mean that to eliminate one of those departments would take a vote of the public?
Sure, but you could, yes. So if I decided I simply wanted to eliminate the finance department,
Right.
and again, that would eliminate it. But the way I've written the language, I say simply that these departments can exist. Now, you may choose or the city manager may choose, or the council may choose not to populate or fund a particular department. It's still in there. But it doesn't actually have to have any duties, sort of like our fire and police pension right now. We've delegated those responsibilities to other folk that oversee it, right? So we don't really have to do those things. It's still in there, but it's really not a meaningful department in and of itself.
I guess what my concern has been all along is the idea that you have to go to the voters to eliminate a department. And I think that's not a good way to operate.
So who would you leave it to?
Council.
Okay. I mean, and you have that option. You can take it out
And that's
altogether.
how the model charter reads.
Well, no, the model charter actually has a provision that does it the way I just described.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if you look at model charters for Missouri cities. And if you go into that section under. Okay, there's another one that's put out by the Missouri Municipal League that has under Article 5, the administrative organization and personnel system. And there is one section, option A, which is what you've described, Paul, which just basically says, we're gonna leave it up to the council and city manager to do what you want to do. Option C, is it B or C?
Is it what?
Option either B or C, I think it's option C. Option C actually says you'll provide for those. Again, telling you my own bias in that regard, that I think leaving the names of them in there is still useful because you want to make sure that you're establishing the power that you have and that have been granted to you. But you can do it either way. It becomes,
What if you want to create a new department? How would you do it?
I have language in there that says that would be up to the council. So that would meet what you've described.
That wouldn't have to go to the voters.
You don't have to go to the voters to do that. And again, it validates what you've said. It is the council's responsibility to do that. I just think that the idea of leaving those in there is important because it does give you a little bit of structure that you can rely
I see your point.
on.
I think that that gives us the best of both worlds because it protects us from the state. We don't know what kind of a council or a city manager will be in the future. I mean, right now we're good, but you just never know. And if the public is not happy, they always have the recourse of referendum. So,
And the suggested language that I put in here is shall have these departments. Again, we can play with those words. I put that out there for thought. And again, you can also take that out. You could say all of these things will be done, at the behest of council and with the conversations of the city manager. I just think it's better to leave some structure. Again, but I'm making you aware, I'm not making the recommendation, you guys are. So
yeah.
No, I see your point.
I just wanted to clarify, this is something we don't have. I don't have this language to look at. Okay, just making sure I'm not
just
missing
an
it.
opposite.
Okay,
And what I'm trying to do again is make sure that what I've proposed doesn't conflict with any other part of the chart. I don't think it does. I think it's good, but I just want to look at it a couple more times to make sure.
That's right. So then conceptually, would this be a series of ballot measures for, if the council approves this going to the voters, is it a series of votes or will it be one vote for that whole section?
For that section, it would be one vote. So it would actually be fairly simple and concise in terms of what you were doing. But you would have language in there, and this is stuff that I'll have to work out with the Board of Election Commissioners. But you would say this language would effectively repeal sections
Section
5, 6, 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it could be done as one ballot measure. We think.
And really, just a couple very short paragraphs with all the appropriate commas.
As long as the Oxford ones are there.
Yeah.
I said English, I meant Oxford, yeah,
Yeah.
which is an English.
Neil, do you see any downside to going this route?
I don't.
Okay,
Again, I just think there's a lot of needless words.
yeah.
And again, it recognizes practically what we're doing, anyway, which is giving council the authority within the code to establish really what these things do. So I think that's good. And I think the things that I've left in there are fundamental to the operation of the city. So again, one of the things you'd like to, I left in this board job, you want that because you want an appellate process, right? Planning and zoning, you want that in there because that has all sorts of implications. You never want to take that out. Again, finance, obviously you want that in there because the primary task of the city manager and the assistant city manager is to provide a budget to council. So you got to have that in there to do all those things. You know, the law department, do you need that? No. You know, again, all of those things that, well, you do need more. But all of those things are, you know, things that are simply not essential. And I didn't leave law department in there. by the most part. So there's stuff that we can take it, but I see no downside to what I.
Okay.
I guess it would be helpful if possible, if we could find some examples of other municipalities that have gone this route, if that is the case, or if we're plowing new ground here.
Yeah, not
Okay.
completely new, because I do rely upon, again, the guide for charter commissions and this is the model charter for Missouri cities. And it does have a good description in here under section 5, or article 5, of the thinking there. So I think you'll be comfortable in that regard. You know, again, but I can look around and see if I can find other language like this that's done that. Again, it would all be post 1971 charter. So I can see that.
Tammy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with the idea now that we've tried looking through things through the public engagement lens. I like the idea of having some sort of a little bit of structure in there, just so that it's very clear what we mean and how we intend these departments and commissions and boards to be set up. Where if it was something where it was all removed, it may raise more questions than we intended.
Neil, can we look at Article 4 in our charter with these changes? Will we need to do some work in there?
So Article 4, Section 1 actually mirrors closely the language I had sent to you. Again, that these particular departments would exist, except I would take out police and fire. You don't need them as separate departments. Those are things that are administratively established by the city manager, by the council. That is not something, in my opinion, you have to include in the charter. You can, but you don't have to. It doesn't diminish what they do or how they do it. The police power is still granted to us according to the charter itself, part of what they've given to us. And so that doesn't need to be in there. Again, the other departments that I do make reference to, well, that's under administrative service. I make reference then to boards and commissions. So I would still put that language in there because that's power that you can sort of combine into Article 4. Subsection 4.2, the directors. Again, and I do, by the way, in my language also have, you know, again, the directors may serve as the head of 2 or more departments and that sort of thing, which is also, again, most of this is going to be done administratively. So I don't know that it needs to be in the charter. I think that, again, just by referencing the existence of these things, I think that we've satisfied what we need to do because the details of this are all in the code anyway, not in the charter. Same with boards and commissions. So once you put in this, you know, for instance, the Department of Finance, again, this is kind of a redundancy because we've said in here, there will be the following departments, and then we say what those departments are in subsequent sections. So what I would suggest is the language that I've send that around just for conversational purposes, because I think that would then take the place of Article 4, and we would simply eliminate everything that we have in these other sections.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that would be consistent, I think.
You know, I'm still puzzled by, it seemed to be you're recommending leaving certain departments in the charter. Why is that necessary? I mean, being in the charter doesn't give them any more or less status.
It's not status, it's power. And
How does it give them more power?
Because again, go back to 54, where we stated all the things that we had the power to do. We put that in the charter, even though there was a general grant of this authority. No pun intended today, by the way, has something to do with Ulysses S. Grant. I think it's, and anyway. So the grant itself was of power, and you had to specify, enunciate what that power was in order to exercise that power. Okay, so again, what I'm saying is taking that original grant from 1954 and saying this is where our ultimate source of power was, even though it's been amended by statute in 1971. It required that you outline these things. And so I'm simply saying, going back to that sort of historical precedent, there's a value.
And I don't understand what it is. I still don't understand it.
So once the charter has been granted, it can't be taken away, okay? It can't, we can't forfeit that charter, it's been given to us, okay? However, the powers can be limited, depending. And again, if we abdicate, if we walk away from these stated powers and simply say, well, we're gonna go on the 1971 amendment that said, we don't have to state these things, they're generally stated. And that statute gets changed and says you have to generally state it. We'd have to go back and either add those things.
Right, you go back and change it.
Yeah, but you'd have to do that by charter amendment.
And it's pretty unlikely that's gonna happen.
You know, it was,
I mean, we can't worry about, you're basing this whole premise on kind of a far-fetched notion of what the legislature might do.
no, what I'm trying to do is accommodate as many possibilities as I can. So when you write a will, when you write a contract, when you write a document like this, you try and think of as many exigencies as you can think of. And that's what this is designed to do, is that you don't want to have something that's so specific that it doesn't change with time. What allows a document to change over time is flexibility. And again, overstating in these instances provides you that flexibility.
To the same token, would overstating police and fire
Right,
be also the same thinking?
right.
That even though the rest of the charter doesn't really talk about those duties and things, but mentioning what is basically a fundamental, duty, activity of city government.
Yeah. If you look at where that is here, though, it says there should be the following administrative departments: finance, finance, law, public works, police, fire, personnel. Then it goes down and talks about the head of each department. Okay. Again, when you look at those powers that are granted, nowhere in there does it say you're granted the power of creating a police department. You're granted the power of creating a fire department. That's implied in the theory of police powers that are granted to us, okay? And police powers not in the capital P, but in small p. So in that instance, again, that is an implied power that I don't think we have to state. But the other things are things that I think we do. Now, can I, for the sake of consistency, can I concede the idea that we could put police and fire in there? Absolutely. I'm not offended by that. I just don't think it's essential. Understood.
Any questions? So, I'll send out this language, it's okay, and then, is the pleasure of the board to look at eliminating these from the charter?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So this would ultimately be an amendment to section 4 and then a removal of those sections that I indicate to you.
That'd be great.
Tammy, you okay with that? Yes, okay.
Can I just ask one question about the ballot measure? So into what level of detail would the ballot question read? Would it just read, section 6 and then say Department of Public Works, or like to what detail would the voter know what's being removed?
So it would include the suggested language.
Okay.
Which again, it's fairly brief, and I'll read it to you if that's okay with you. Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
yes,
I'll read
please.
it to you. So that you can see. Here's the language. The council shall adopt by ordinance in chapter 3 of the city code, which is reference to the city code, chapter 3 of the city code. An administrative plan of organization and structure for at least the following departments: Department of Finance, Department of Public Works, Department of Personnel, Department of Law, boards and commissions to include Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Recreation. The administrative plan shall be consistent with this charter. Unless otherwise required by law, all boards and commissions provided for in the administrative plan shall be appointed by the council, parenthetically, or by the mayor with the consent of council and parents. Additional departments, boards, and commissions may be created by ordinance. 2 or more departments may be headed by the same person, and the city manager may have 1 or more. Period. So we would say this language, which would become Article 4, and would essentially mean the deletion of existing Article 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11.
And would the names of those sections be listed on the ballot? Okay. Cool.
Now, again, that might be something we end up negotiating with the Board of Election Commissioners on there. I think you put not just the article, but the title of the article, so people can really see what it is. But they get really pissy about the words. So, and it's not the meaning, the substance of the words, it's the number of words. So, yeah, they're really, Eric Fay is a great guy, I really like him. But flip side of it is they pay attention.
Thank you.
Dr. Peoples, I think that in our earlier things that you wanted us to look at, the council wanted us to look at, that the city manager heading 1 or more departments was something that you wanted to strike.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Can you say the second part again?
The part where the city manager may head 1 or more departments, I think that's something that you did not want to continue doing, having in the charter.
I'm good with the language that Neil suggested. I think that resolves it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, may means you don't have to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Question. Neil, have you looked at are there any implications with the budget language in the finance section that we need to preserve in any way? Now that you put everything right.
So what section, what
5.12 and
and the answer without having looked at it yet is maybe.
It starts at 5.1 and it's the whole budgeting, auditing process and it goes into that the finance section. Irrespective of the organization of the department, this is more of the functions of the finance function.
I don't think it does, but that's what I suggested to the chair. I want to make sure that there isn't anything that I proposed here that runs afoul of what we're doing in the other, what we're mandated to do in the other section. But I do have the catch-all language that says whatever we're doing shall be consistent with the rest of the charter. So when it comes to statutory construction in these situations, you have to read it in a manner consistent with the law. And again, you have to look for that meaning that will allow it to fit within consistency. So I don't think it does, but that's part of what I want to look at, because when I was going through this today, you realize that you're touching many parts of the charter by making these changes. Again, substantively, I don't think that any of it does any harm to what we're doing, but that's what I want to look at. But at first blush, I would say no, it does not. It does not, I don't think anything runs afoul of that. And again, when we come to budgeting and that sort of thing, budgeting is an obligation and responsibility of the city manager. Again, 5.8 talks about that. It doesn't mandate that you budget specific departments. So there's nothing in here that says you got to have police and you got to budget. You got to have fire and you got to budget. You got to have personnel, you got to budget. What it says is you got to budget. So again, I think it's written broadly enough that will apply to these changes. But that's what I want to look at, Jim. So I want to make sure.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm. That's a great question.
That's the one thing I'm being obsessive here, but bear with me. If for some reason the city decided it was a good thing to merge the recreation department with adjoining cities and create a mid-county recreation department, would they have to go to the voters?
No,
No?
no. So again, who are we merging with?
Other municipalities to create, let's say, a multi-jurisdictional recreation department.
No, because theoretically you would still have a planning.
You still have the recreation,
Part
but
of
it would be a different leadership structure.
Yeah, but again, it's all ultimately
Alright.
going to report back to city council. They will do it by ordinance. No, that would not. be
I'm glad that you said that's good.
Yeah, no, that does not, there's nothing about this that would prevent that.
Okay.
Or, again, merging with
That's
Shrewsbury.
just an example. I'm not suggesting you do that.
No, I get it. No, but again, it's written broadly enough that I think you have the power to do that. And that's the art in the creation and
Okay.
construction of these documents, is to give you broad discretionary power.
That makes me feel good. Thank you.
Paul, that's what I'm here for. All right, now I.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks.
There are a couple provisions I do want to check with Neil on. If there is an adversarial nature between administration and council, namely if you look at the end of Article 5. So Neil and I have contact.
Yeah, like I said, it's an organic. It's an organic document, and that's what you have to look at is all the parts. Nothing is compartmentalized.
Yeah,
So you have to make sure that you're looking at all the parts. So
okay,
that-
thank you. So we'll put that in the priority column and wait for Neil to go through it with a fine tooth comb and see if he comes up with any issues. And Eric, you'll get with him on that finance stuff. Okay. Now I lost my agenda. Oh, here we are. It really kind of wipes out most of our considerations. Oh, we did have one, and this was, John wanted to change or eliminate, Article 15.15, remitting taxes prohibited. Does anybody want to take up that?
I think it's a good suggestion. Yes.
It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, should make that change.
Anybody else want to broach that?
I guess I'd be, if the city can let us know what the cost of that provision would be. I don't remember, I know there's a cost.
Well, but it just says it can't be done and we're just saying it can. It doesn't mean it will be, right? It's still up to the city to decide. They'd work out the cost piece, but we're just saying it's allowed to do it at all. Right now, they can't even consider it. So we're not proposing any amount. We're just opening the door to let them consider it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, which provision? I'm sorry.
It's
I'm having-
Article 15.15, remitting taxes prohibited.
That is one that council was interested in, certainly.
They are,
They're interested in it. There is a cost to it for sure.
okay. So shall we put that under council consideration? Council should consider that.
I'd like to, that'd be
Yeah.
fun.
Okay. And then 15.7 was officers and employees qualifications. And that was to prohibit appointment to boards and commissions for unpaid taxes. I don't think we made a decision on that.
So that would be to make it more comprehensive, to make this requirement on those boards and commission members, correct?
Right.
Yeah, we've got a yes, and the council consider that
We did?
on this, yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we do. Thank you, Matthew. Okay,
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
When we say council should consider, what do we mean by that terminology?
it means that it wasn't a high overwhelming majority priority for us, but it's something that they could look at, should look at. There's enough interest.
And do we as the members have the opportunity to bring forward back any of these items later here in our deliberations?
Uh-huh.
A vote if we need to.
Yeah, no, we will have to vote on the final package.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Am I missing anything? I think it's covered here. We can move on to old business and the subcommittee updates. And Kyle, you're still on the list, but I don't know if you have anything.
I have no updates until after we get done with public engagement, but thank
Okay.
you.
All right. And Joe, public engagement?
Sure. Thank you. So with our member packets that were sent out here, we included a draft copy of the online survey. So all members of the board have that, correct? And I don't know if you've had a chance to look through that. Maybe time a while, we'll come back and maybe discuss that in a little more detail. Get some, but let me kind of just quickly describe a process here that I'd like to suggest that we consider going forward in order to get public engagement underway. In order to, and I've had conversations with Jenny Starkey of the city staff, courtesy of Dr. Peoples. We've connected with her. She has already uploaded that survey into SurveyMonkey. So I have been working and I've been granted temporary access to do editing. I can do simple editing. I can't do anything complicated. So I've been going through and trying to help with formatting and wording of items in order to address some usability issues. And, members may have some other comments and ideas to suggest, and wording of questions. Particularly, I think that's very important, Kyle, particularly for your sections that you're interested in. But as I understand, talking with Jenny, is that we were looking at piggybacking on some of the city communications vehicles. The next opportunity to do that, say, for the Inside Webster Groves content in particular, that's the monthly, monthly newsletter that's in the Webster Kirkwood Time, that our next deadline would be for us would be May 17th, basically. It would be published the next week. Publishing the week of May, well, Thursday, May 25th. So, I mean, again, so we missed the April section, so we'd have to be looking at May. And so we kind of got back plan from that as far as how to meet those timing needs. And when I put together a straw man schedule that I've shared with our public engagement members here couple nights ago, I guess it was, looking at this week, identifying a date, and location to hold an initial listening session. primarily to kind of pressure test the online survey or at least the survey in some form. I think probably we could use the online version or we can use a print version and using that as a process. If we're able to schedule that for the week of May 8th, then we would be able to incorporate input from that group of invited participants, say 10 to 15, no more than 15, but probably 10 to 12 people, just to give us some feedback and reaction to the usability of the survey. And also discuss other, issues that they want to bring up in terms of the charter itself, and use that as a listening session that, 2 or 3 of us from the board, whether that's the public engagement committee or whatever members are available, could sit in on. And I'm willing to volunteer to facilitate that if somebody else wants to step up and facilitate. Just be kind of a sit-down conversation with folks and go through the survey. Looking at that, probably, week of May 8th, at least as of this morning, the public library's meeting room is open on Wednesday, May 10th. And I'm, with permission of the board members here, I'd like to go ahead and reserve that, at least hold it. And then we can start the process and inviting a group of community leaders and other people that have been suggested. The city staff provided us a working list that they've used before. Other members of our public engagement committee have offered up other names. We'll just kind of start working through that list and see who we can get to show up on that date once I get that location reserved. And go through that process. And then, the other deadlines, there's I think the city does a Friday news, I guess the email blast is done every Friday.
Correct.
So we could piggyback on that once we're ready to open the survey up to the public, which I'm thinking could be Thursday, May 18th. Assuming that we can get all agreement on wording of the survey, the questions that need to be in there, and have that finalized by then. So that would be the process there. We could look at whether we want to pursue spending, if we have budget available to do some social media, Facebook boosting, which kind of helps get your event on the people's timeline. There's a little budgeting that could be done against that for a modest amount of money. I understand. Whether we want to pursue any actual newspaper ad is another option, but I don't know if that necessarily needs to be done. Look at that opportunity. In talking with Jenny and Dr. Peoples, you keep me honest here. My understanding is that the Survey Monkey survey that was done a few weeks or months ago on the strategic planning process that was done had something a little under 300 valid participants.
Sounds about
I think
right.
Jenny said 280 to 300, a number of that nature.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Offhand, I think that's probably analogous to what we would expect. So just so you understand, this is not the recreation survey on the swimming pool and all that kind of stuff that had what, a couple thousand?
It's not that many,
not
but
that,
it has the most
1,600?
we've seen. So
Over 1,000, but we won't get that. So at best, we would probably be looking at, 200 to 300 sort of responses is kind of what it would probably end up being. And then in terms of other public engagement activities, I planned out this far. I need to get together with our subcommittee and talk through further. I think we want to look at, holding some other, at least one other listening session, and then probably some kind of an open, perhaps town hall sort of thing that is people are invited to come, or the public is invited to come. Whereas what I'm suggesting for May tenth would be an invitation only, smaller group sort of a process. So those are my suggestions. Happy, if we want to look at the survey, I guess we can go through any parts of it. We could do that in terms of the print version that was sent around. Still working through the online, not quite ready to share that yet, but I would hope to be able to send that out to everyone by email here in the next day or two, so you can kind of see what it looks like online. You kind of go through it and test usability there and provide us back feedback and suggestions. If any of the, Tammy or Jeannie or Jennifer, any other comments here on from the public engagement side?
My comment is, you've done a wonderful job, pulling all this together, and everybody has, as far as looking at things and making edits. It's really consolidated down into a easy to use survey, I believe. And
I had just a really broad question. I don't even know if we can answer this. So yeah, I agree with that, by the way, that I'm happy with how it's turned out. Again, town hall is really where my brain is going, but then I'm questioning the bigger picture. So we are proposing several changes that we're going to try to review, which is the survey and is the listening session and all those things. But then it's going to go to council, and council's going to make their own decision, have their own list, and then is council going to repeat all of that? So like, again, in my mind, I'm like, we've got to do a town hall so we get in front of people, but I actually don't know if that's something we should be doing, or if that's like, once the decision's made of the final things that gets promoted. I'm really picturing the school boundaries sessions where there were all these town halls, and I don't know where that was, it seems like there's two different sections where that can happen. So I don't know if there's an answer to that.
So Madam Chair, I think that's a great question. I'm happy to work with council on it. As of now, there are not those next step plans because it's unknown what you all will bring to council. So I would imagine in terms of the public engagement pieces, if town halls are done, that would probably cover the gamut. But I can get some more information and have a discussion with members about that. In terms of budget, I'll go back to Mr. Dugan's question. After you all decide what you want in terms of social media boost, if you want an ad, if there's other things, we can find the funding for that.
Jennifer, in terms of, does doing a town hall make sense for us to do versus the city council? I think that's something worth discussing with the council or their preferences. I mean, can you have too much public engagement? I don't know, probably not. At the same time, I think we are at a part of this process where it's going to be hard to get public engagement because people aren't focused on this. Until there's kind of a formal set of proposals in front of them, it's hard to get people engaged. And it doesn't directly affect them in their view. So, I mean, frankly, I don't know if doing a town hall, if we open it up, even if we advertised, I don't know how many, attendees you would actually get at this stage in the process when it's the voting for this is still, April of next year.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up. I wanted to do it because I think we need to get in front of people, but yeah, it may be too early. That might be a later step. I don't, that's where it's not my expertise.
yeah, it's kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the other. To me, I don't know. Personally, I would probably just in my personal life, wait till I had the final, what we're going to be voting on in front of me to go to a town hall, but I don't know.
I guess I would suggest that we're probably when we get to the point where we have a draft report or some sort of a consolidated document. I think at that juncture, then we can have a better sense of, is this something that we need to have broader input?
Right.
Even though it's at, toward the end of the process, the set of changes are more consolidated. Right now this survey is the first attempt at kind of pulling together at least a set of topics that we're proposing to tweak. And then, but the exact changes and proposals that we're gonna put forward is what people will want to react to.
Tammy, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think I like what Jennifer was suggesting and thinking. I don't think that it had come up in our group before. But I do think that there is, even if few people come up, 5 or 6 or whatever, I do think that there is value in having the opportunity for people to come in person and ask questions and have that space to lend their voice to what's going to the council, to say that they either agree or disagree with the importance of something before it gets there, because not everybody has access to the internet and to doing a survey that way. Again, I'm happy to show up to that and to be there, even if it is a small turnout, just so that we have that opportunity there and that we're as open and accessible to the people of our community as we can be.
So I think, I agree with that, but I think that to have that sort of thing, we need to have a presentation,
Mhm.
which really would talk about, well, this is what it is we're thinking, this is. And so once we have that, because otherwise, if you just say, well, what don't you like, or do you like about the charter, the people say, what?
Right.
No, I agreed that it would be after this, these surveys have gone out and after we've had listening sessions, but still before we go to council.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think all the points have been really well taken, spoken, that we should do everything we can to maximize participation, but we shouldn't get all hung up on numbers. That we can only do the best we can. And, there usually tends to be, but the people who do come out usually tend to feel more strongly about the issue, which is good.
I guess one other idea I'll throw out that I haven't discussed with any other public engagement members or Jeannie, is whether in the course of the next few months, if we want to invite certain members of the community to come here and present to us any ideas. Again, I don't know if that makes sense, but right now we don't formally invite people. It's just kind of a passive. Anybody can come here. We're holding our public sessions, whether you actually reach out to certain people, and maybe we kind of figure that part out as we do a listening session or two, and determine, is there bigger interest in having some engagement in a formal sense to us, rather than this more of this kind of a small invitationally quiet sort of discussion. Are there issues that are part of our developing package of changes that will, we assume at some point, some folks are going to say, hey, I'm either for or against that idea, and they want to speak out on it, or raise some concerns that maybe we haven't thought of.
Yeah, I know people are busy, and but I posted on Facebook and sent emails to people, in particular when we were doing the ward discussion. I know people in Webster that have strong feelings about wards on both sides, and so I invited them when we were having that discussion, and 2 people came and they did not speak to us. So they were more here listening, which is fine. So
I
Can't-
never saw those posts. Like I tried to go find them. So I think it's a Facebook issue of, Facebook has some major issues. So it's great to try that, but I don't think it gets a great reach sometimes. I think
Yeah.
it's really selective in who sees that.
yeah. Tammy?
I wanted to just say that I really like the idea of that, because even as we were going through with the city, trying to find ways to engage more women in boards and commissions and participating in the community, there's really a strong piece that affects participation is being invited. So even if it was, like organizations or something that we reached out to, or things like that, being invited is really important. And whether or not they took us up on it, or whether they looked at everything in the survey and then said, you know what, that sounds good to us, that's fine. But I think, again, having that piece where we reach out and try to be as open as we can makes a big difference.
Yep, I agree. Anything else, Joe?
No, just in terms of venues, I mean, just since we do have time here, I'm kind of looking at the library meeting room, if that is open for May 10th. Are there any other locations that board members want to throw out there that we want to potentially look at down the road?
We have access to the rec center meeting
Absolutely.
room.
I would have to check, see what's available
Right.
at the time frame, but of course.
And is that set up with audio visual stuff, or would we have to
We,
latch on to that from either the city staff or our own?
it does not have audio visual set up as council meeting and other conference rooms do, but we have we could bring in audio visual. It's difficult, but we can do it, and we have, and we've had council meetings there. We had
Right.
some of the interviews there
Yeah.
as well, so we can make it work.
I may be biased as a family of ridiculous readers, but I like the library because it's not hard to find. And the rec center stresses me out. I don't know where to go. And so I mean, maybe other people don't feel that way, but I worry that like the library is easier for people to figure out where to go because it's smaller. And the rec center, it's harder. Just like we said, coming in here is harder too.
I'd like to see some site in North Webster, whether.
Where the
it's a
North
church-
Webster Association meets.
Yeah,
I don't know, I don't know if there's community facilities.
Yeah,
like churches
Douglas
or
Manor.
something like that.
yeah.
I think the rec center, if you set it up right, there's events I've gone to where there's been good signage. Go here.
Yeah.
And
The
it
key-
works.
key
If the
is signage.
signage is not good, it is, can be confusing.
I think I'm thinking like when you say rec center, I'm like, oh, like before I've even gotten there, I already have a dread.
But the parking is the best there.
Yeah. It is good parking.
I mean, I think it's awfully hard to miss the facility, you may then have trouble once you're there navigating.
But I agree with the North Webster.
Or a church, meeting room, somebody's a member of a congregation where we can, get a reservation that way, no
Mhm.
cost, whatever, but. Anyway, we can kind of talk about that here in the next, few weeks, but I think I will aim for the library. Hopefully this May 10th date still open by, tonight, tomorrow, when I put our application in and hold it. We'll go forward with that. And they have a lot of their dates at the library are already booked in the evening, and I'm looking at, 6:30 or 7 start. Because I would get my work day out of the way, and then I could come there, and that makes sense. So I'm probably looking at it like a 6:30 type start for an hour, hour and a half at the most.
That is the same week as the next charter board meeting. So as long as somebody has the ability to be with you, I know I can't do that date. So just if people are okay to double up that week. I think it's a good choice otherwise. Tammy's got her hand up.
Yeah.
I agree with Jennifer on the rec center. The whole sports and equipment and families moving in and out and everything. It personally, as a community member, that would be my last choice. Though I do like the idea of the library, but if we're concerned about parking, I think Eden Seminary, don't they have a nice kind of meeting hall there on their grounds, and there's lots of parking? That might be something, I love North Webster. I'm just not as familiar with parking and facilities there. I'm available that week to attend and help, take notes or whatever for that listening session. So
Great.
And one of the things that we've talked about in the wards group is the desire to have more South Webster participation. So if we could do something in South Webster as well, I don't know where.
Other
do
than
that.
the Rex, Center, which is in Southwest.
Yeah,
I mean.
okay.
The best options. You talk to Lutheran Church of Webster Groves right down in Watson, wherever are facilities that the city has used at other times.
Or there's also potentially go to the school district and see about, Edgar Road School. We can look at that option too. Just gotta work through John Simpson and, whether there's staff available in the evening and if there's any cost involved.
There is, facilities request form online that you put through, so.
Okay.
That's minimal.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a comment about the survey, and this is
Yeah.
not have to be a big deal, but as long as we're here and have the time. As I was seeing this all through, I'm like, oh, I'm still worried that people do the survey and be confused or have more comments. Like they need to know where to submit. And I looked back and realized you did a great job on the first page of making it very clear ways that we could be reached. But I wonder if we have to repeat that at the end, because I'm not going to pay attention when I start the survey. I'm not going to make a note of that. I'm going to take the whole survey in the middle. I'm going to be like, oh, I have thoughts. So I wonder if we should repeat the contact information at the very end.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement and see if that can be done. If you've done online surveys.
I know there's
like me,
limits,
You
yeah.
get to that last question, you hit done is submit and you're done.
Yeah.
But maybe there is a sign off page, which maybe we can put other content.
Yeah, not required, but just,
Yeah,
yeah, possibility.
Okay, just make a final question that, is there other stuff? If not, here's a link for where you can send it.
Sure,
So just a free form.
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
what you want here.
good idea.
That is the last question on the survey already.
Were there any other comments? I mean, before we leave the survey and public engagement part, did anybody else have any comments you want to raise on questions and anything that we need to dive deeper into?
Well, I sent you my comments and the questions 5 and 6 just seem redundant and I cannot distinguish between those and question 4.
Okay, 4,
So
5,
I
and
think,
6.
so I think just one question for all of that, they didn't make sense.
My
agree.
husband said the same thing, Matthew.
Okay.
I thought it was too many similar questions.
Question 4 really seemed to cover the major question.
And of 4, 5, and 6, but 4 kind of encapsulates the best of it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think you do a good job of explaining the context of each question, and you could just include the context of the other two in the little intro you give for that section.
4.
Or 4, 5, 6, and
Okay.
7. I think you can limit that to 2 questions.
Okay.
Should it be raised? And here's the proposal.
And then some stuff I think is too detailed. There's a paragraph on other home ruled communities and non-home, and it's like nobody has a clue as to what any of that means, and it really doesn't add anything to the question.
Right.
It's like, local people around us do this or don't do this. So.
That's just the home rule word there that you don't like.
No, it's that whole sentence, I don't think really, because we say it. Is, the next paragraph, a proposal to raise the
Oh, I see.
compensation.
Okay,
Says that without,
you're right.
yeah, and nobody's gonna I don't think anybody is gonna compare those things. That's our job.
I do like having the link to the table so that people that want to compare it can. But I
Yeah,
think you
what,
could cut out the
Jennifer?
words.
Can you say that again?
Oh, sorry, I do think, I'm fine with getting rid of that paragraph, but I'd still keep the link to the table.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Jenny and I, and once we and that's another point I would just want to raise. These tables that we're going to link out to, we got to make sure that our content that we're going to post up there as a PDF is all accurate, proofed out. I shared with the public engagement group here, at least the first round, and we've already identified some things that need to be tweaked in the votes cast, the whole petition threshold question, because it's votes cast and ballots language is a little confusing, and there is an interpretation of the charter language that it is a little bit different than what you read there, because it says, votes cast, but they're actually counting ballots cast, because that eliminates the duplicates and multiple, if you got 3 or 4 council, you got 2 or 3 council races happening, those will have more votes cast. So we're actually, the thresholds are based on ballots cast. Is way the city attorney to interpret that over the years. So anyway, just need to double check that, but, and then Jenny and I, and we will have to just double check on usability, because you're going to link out, and will the user, get lost once they link out. So we don't want to do this too much, but I think for 2 or 3 instances, or 4 at the most, we need that extra content.
Link to a new tab,
Yeah, or new tab, yes.
and you can put a symbol next to it so that it indicates that that's what it's doing.
Yeah. Good point, thank you.
Okay. There any questions and comments on,
Can I go ask one more question? about
Yeah.
that? So I know that you said that you put it into Survey Monkey. I believe it'll give you an estimated time of completion. Do you know what that is?
10 minutes,
Oh, great.
80% completion rate. According to the model.
And it'll,
Algorithm. So that's very good.
it will improve when we,
It actually, but that does not include linking out to things, so that will slow you down. But yeah, 10 minutes, pretty good.
That's good.
Considering, there's quite a few words and stuff like that. That's what it says.
and not to belabor the topic, but I know we're gonna discuss this more, but I don't. Set question 17 for the demographics. I'm sure there was a lot of ink spilled over. What's the best way to get a geographic idea of where people are submitting these from? What other items were considered besides nearest elementary school?
The simplest thing would just be north of 44, south of 44. That's the simplest thing to do. Now, I think, in our subcommittee, we talked about North Webster, mid Webster, the Golden Triangle area, and then South Webster. But that's pretty amorphous. So I kind of, even though we're using that a little bit for our outreach in terms of identifying people to invite in, for a survey process, I don't think that's confusing to people. So that's where I landed. My significant other and my wife sat and we brainstormed this, and I know the school district, has in the past, used the school district boundaries, which is familiar to parents who are homeowners who have, kids in the school district and all that, or you pay your taxes. So you're kind of familiar with what school is your local area. I decided not to get too wrapped up in that and just say, which one are you closest to? That at least gives us a sense. However, we could just go north of 44 or south of 44. I mean, you can't use Lockwood because Lockwood doesn't go all the way through. I don't know. Any other suggestions?
I'm not sure north of 44 or south of 44 tells us that.
It probably wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Again, the purpose of the demographic thing is just to kind of, pressure test that we're not getting a group of people from just one part of town, that's responding, or if it's just all, middle-aged, men that are responding.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could use the school boundaries. Most people know that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that made good sense.
What about, did we leave out Hudson on purpose?
Hmm?
Isn't there another school, Hudson, that should be on there?
Hudson's in Rock Hill.
No.
Tammy,
Yeah,
Yeah, so people might get a little bit confused with that question because sometimes kids go to other schools even though like they might go to Hudson because Hudson has something special that they offer. And so I think there's value in adding it to the list. Just, for that reason, because somebody that lives in Old Webster may be sending their child to Hudson. The other question that I have is, I'm trying to imagine if I'm taking a survey and there's links for information and there's more than one link during the survey, is that going to hinder me from wanting to go back and complete it? And so I was wondering if it might be helpful or possible or a good idea to consider is putting a link at the beginning in the explanation of what the survey is of, if you would like some more data or deeper information on some of these topics, please, click this link before you start the survey or something like that, so that then they can kind of go all the way through or could go back to the link if they needed to. It was just something that kind of came up to me as I'm imagining taking this as a participant.
You could put all of those links, the contents of all those in one web page associated with the numbers and open that in another tab, and people could go and you say, this is going to open another tab, so you can refer back and forth to that. And then there's only a single link that has everything that you want, but have to be numbered with the questions, but that would be straightforward.
yeah, we could explore that idea. All the documents will need to be posted into the city's document center online, which is this massive archive, I guess, of PDFs out there. And because that's publicly accessible, I want to make sure that when we're ready to post something up, that this is the final accurate thing that we put in there. We could, work with the city staff and develop, as Matthew's suggesting, a separate web page or a part of our current Webster Charter Commission web page, and have just, resources, referred to in the survey, and have those 3, 4, 5, whatever PDFs that are part of it. So that can be done that way. And we can look at Tammy's suggestion of just having a reference up in the intro. We could do it that way. The problem is once you start going through the survey, you're away from that link out to the wherever we're posting these survey or PDFs. So we'll have to kind of think through.
Yeah, I think a combination where there's only one link, but it's in there multiple times.
Yeah.
All the data's one click takes you to everything, but you could click it at the beginning or every time it comes up. Because I'm not going to click it at the beginning and then I'm going to regret that I didn't click it at the beginning when I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Good. Thank you for the input.
Unless that document's just like too huge, we'd have to actually look at what that looks like.
But I think, but still only one is
Yeah,
going to be,
it's better.
otherwise it's just going to be people, it's just going to be too much of a pain in the ass for the user.
Yeah.
Eric, did you have an alternative way to geographically locate people?
We oftentimes, if you look at our districts that we use for police districts and such, Elm is the north-south, so you can divide by quadrant. Elm runs the full length up and down. So
And one other thing that I don't know if it's possible in SurveyMonkey, but I know that they use with their balancing act tool is you can drop a pin near, like within a, I don't know how large the pin is, but you could drop it where you reside. So like, I don't have any idea what school I live near. I don't have children and I've never been to school. So it's just an option and would be a little bit more exact.
We were wanting to, I guess, be concerned about privacy.
It is
If you
optional.
do that, yeah, it's optional. So that's why I kind of erred away from that aspect, but.
I just worry that collecting the data, if it's so non-specific, that what's the point of asking? Because, is it the crow flies or how quick it is to drive, or is it where my kid goes? Like, people are going to answer that question however they feel, or they might ignore it because they say, I don't go to school. I'm not going to tell you.
Or a lot of I don't knows that.
Yeah.
knows the truth.
I mean, I would look it up because I would care, but some people
That's
just
still
don't know.
probably-
Do you think that, as Eric suggested, using Elm or I don't know.
Sounds like we
Just
need
an
some
idea.
wards.
Then you're just east and west.
Well, we usually do it the way you do it, north and south and then east west. You create a quadrant.
Based off of 44.
44, or you can use big one, either one.
You use Elm for east, west, and what do you use for north, south, like 44?
Difference between departments, it's 44, Big Bend, I mean, they track on each other.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me,
That works.
we'll explore that and see if we can come up with a better
Mhm.
option than what I got there in terms of the schools. Okay. Good point, Kyle. So,
Otherwise, fantastic survey. I'm not trying to nitpick. That's the only thing I have a problem with.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any questions, comments, or discussion related to anything we've already reviewed?
Again, a really broad question. I think that we like the survey and I don't think we want to make it longer, but are we good with, like, there's not other things we wanted to survey? We're happy with the things that are on there. Like in terms of thinking about the charter changes, are there other changes we're considering that we need input on? I think not, because I think they're more general.
Mhm.
I guess what I'd suggest is, in terms of my scheduling, if members here want to have a little more time to look at it, but I do need feedback this week to fold it into the process here. And once I send around the link to the online version, take shots at then, maybe, maybe there'll be some other ideas come together, in terms of, the department's language that we've been discussing earlier tonight. There's one question that kind of just talks, very high level about giving the city council and city manager more authority. Whether we want to go into any more specifics, I think we got to wait until we can probably see Neil's language and see if that prompts any kind of questions. And maybe in the next couple of weeks, there might be an opportunity to insert another question or two if we think it's needed.
I have an additional question about the compensation. I apologize, I wasn't here the day that you guys talked about this at length, but I feel like we brought up the fact that what we had proposed as a subcommittee wasn't really high enough, that if we were going to do this, that we should bring it to today's standards. And we're reflecting, your question does reflect the amounts that we brought to the table. So I'm just curious on where we landed there.
On compensation?
The compensation, and maybe I misunderstood that. Am I wrong in the fact that that was brought up, that what the subcommittee, as far as the levels on question number 7, I have notes when I went back and watched the meeting that we discussed, I believe Tammy and Dr. Peoples brought it up, that if we were going to be making changes to compensation, that we should bring it, what we had done as a subcommittee was compared to levels, I think, from 2012. When we look back at what Creve Coeur had done and when they did it.
Right.
Am I the only one that remembers this conversation? Okay, well then I will table that.
Come back to me on that.
I will. I'll go
don't
find it on the
know-
recording because I wasn't here for the meeting, but it was brought up. I'm obviously, if nobody remembers it, then maybe I misunderstood what was discussed.
I recall the discussion. I don't recall what numbers, the amount, the numbers. landed.
Right. And so from where I thought we landed was that we needed more discussion on what those amounts would be. And so in the survey, you say they are these amounts. So I didn't realize as a board that we had decided on that amount.
Okay, Tammy?
Yeah, we did talk about amounts and I believe it was based on what Neil had helped another in Jefferson Township or a place somewhere set up, which was $1,000 per month for council members and $1,200 for the mayor. I believe the reason we settled on these amounts for this survey was just concerns over whether or not, with all of the other budgetary issues and things that are going on in the city, whether or not we could get people to engage and to agree to a change without being specific on how it would be funded. I do believe that in this question, we should try to suggest that. Otherwise, people will want to know why we're spending more money and where it might come from. I don't know if it's a small enough amount that we can just say it would come from the general fund, or if there's some recently passed sources of income. I do think that those are important questions, that if there's or like in that one, it's very clear how much it would be per year. But if there's other things where, these changes would have no budgetary, are expected to have no budgetary effect or something like that, that some language to that effect could be helpful for the people trying to give us feedback. That's a big gap of information that I think our community likes to see consistently. They always have that question.
Can I maybe make a suggestion? And I know that we'll have an opportunity to look at the survey more, but maybe we shouldn't give a specific proposal and put, we haven't made a decision. There wasn't unanimity in what we discussed last time. Maybe we ask the question a different way and put a sliding scale of what would you feel comfortable paying each member, whether it's per year, per meeting, and we get a ask the question in a different way than saying, is this too high, is this too low? Ask them to give us a number, and that can help us factor into the proposal that we will ultimately want to make.
I haven't read this survey yet, but it'd be a good thing to tell people the last time it was raised, or if it was ever raised.
Yes,
Then-
that's
It
in the
does.
setup.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, because it would be hard to argue. When was the last time it was raised? Does anybody know offhand?
65.
65.
So, I mean, it's hard to say you haven't been a pay increase at 65.
Right.
I don't think too many people could
Yes.
quarrel about that.
Now, we can revisit that. I know, and Jeannie, early on, you'd also provided some alternative kind of wording of the compensation sort of questions, so we can go back to that. I mean, I was just looking back at my notes. I think what I put forward in terms of a subcommittee report was using the $400 a month for council members, the $600 per month for the mayor, and in terms of the proposal to start with. And to Tammy's point, and yours, Melissa, there was discussion about, is that even adequate enough? So,
Okay, so
yes,
my comment is.
We can include those amounts in the survey, given that we haven't approved those as a full board yet.
I do think we have to put something in, right? Because we're trying to get a sense of what people think. And so whether it's this number or this scale of numbers, but I wouldn't want to take out numbers, because then.
No, I like the idea of the scale
Yeah.
too, because again, as discussed at that meeting, these numbers that were comparative to Creve Coeur were voted on in 2010 or 12. I don't recall. So again, looking at data that old, I think having a scale is much more appropriate than throwing out numbers that are dated if we're trying to true up this number.
Has anybody figured go back to 65 and let's say 3% a year until now, what that would come out to?
All of that already.
Oh, Tammy?
Yeah, I was wondering if, I don't have it in the document that I have open in front of me. Does the chart that we're going to be putting in with this have when the last time, so we're comparing it to other communities that are of a similar size, but do we have information on when the last time was that theirs was updated, kind of like Melissa said. I think that's relevant. You know, if Neil was working with a township that did it very recently, and that's the number that they came up with, I think timeline becomes relevant.
Yeah, yes, if you would, Madam Chair. The data points that are in that comparison document is what both the city, or at least Mayor Arnold provided, pulled together early in our process, and then I double checked through those things. Those are the numbers that are available for the most part online in other charters or city code or code. And in a few cases, we had to refer to newspaper articles because a lot of the cities don't publicize this when they're approving it basically on ordinance. And so it's not in their charters. So it's gonna be kind of hard to track down unless you go back and contact each city government to try to chase it down. But at least when I went through that process, the data was the latest that was available publicly that I could find.
But there was information like this was in whatever year, like that was in there. I
That's
can't-
true, but like Webster Groves, they don't change their rates very often. And then I think, as I recall, what Neil was talking about was something was it Lincoln County? I mean, something outside of St. Louis County, I believe.
So we'll just kind of roll back through things.
An alternative wording question, and I'll circle that around and see if we can reach agreement on that, okay?
Okay. Does anybody want to add agenda items for the next meeting? Future meeting dates, we have already May 8th and May 25th. Do we want to go out from there?
I think we said May 23rd originally, because it was second Monday and fourth Tuesday.
Wonder if that's just a typo because this was 25th today.
Yeah.
I have the 23rd on my calendar. Is it the 25th?
No, the 23rd is what.
It's the 23rd.
I think it should be the 20. Did I write that down? Did the secretary make a mistake? Probably. No.
No, you're right.
I'll check for future agendas.
May
That's the-
23rd. Do we want to go further? Set up meetings further?
Following that convention would be June the 12th and June the 27th at 5.
June the
12th, Monday, June 12th and Tuesday, June 27th.
There any conflicts, Eric, Dr. Peoples?
I don't see any right now, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, we'll go with that. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it. Oh, so Matthew will, and I will second it.
Okay, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.